All right, Ball Don't Lie podcast. I'm gonna call this episode one. I'm gonna do a reaction video again to Bill Simmons podcast. This time about their MVP discussions. Um, but I'm gonna talk about some stuff that happened today in the league. Start off with that. I'm gonna go into NBA TopShot as well. Look at some of the challenges. See if that brings interest. Uh, so I'm going to start this off as a sort of podcast format. Um, so, first thing that happened today uh, was a play-in tonight. We had two games. We had Cleveland versus Brooklyn, uh, with Brooklyn taking that one, and the Clippers versus Minnesota, with Minnesota taking that one. These were the 7 and 8 seeds, of course. So the winners of these games, Minnesota and Brooklyn, move on to face the two seeds. Um, the losers of these games get to face the winner of the next game, which is between the 9 and 10 seeds in their respective conferences. So, first game for tonight was Brooklyn versus Cleveland. This took place in Brooklyn, of course, after the events this morning with the shooting incident in the subway. Um, Brooklyn crowd came out pretty loud tonight. Very nice playoff atmosphere that they had supporting a team, and this team looks dangerous. I'm not going to go too much into the recaps, but Kyrie Irving started off 12 for 12 in the game, through the first three quarters. He was just absolutely on fire. The team was clicking, shooting threes. Their centers, Claxton, Drummond, were playing pretty good defense. Exactly what they need if that team gets that this season. Doesn't look like they're going to get Ben Simmons back. They might, but he's not even practicing, and they don't even have practice or anything anymore. So they might not get Ben Simmons back. So they definitely need that defense. They need Bruce Brown to continue playing at the level he is, which is a very high level right now. The other thing in this game, Cleveland, of course, outmatched in this game, underdogs in this game. It's fair. Brooklyn's has the second highest odds to make the finals out of the East, and they're going to be the 7 seed, so they should be favorites over the Celtics on the road. Let me look for my thing that I have here. Okay, so Jared Allen didn't play this game. He might play next game. It looked like he was very close to playing. It was kind of surprising. A lot of people were knocking him on Twitter for not playing, for an injury that's taken, 5 weeks to heal, which is right around the time that you would expect. It's just people on Twitter being mean to people. But, of course, with this is not being an elimination game, but close to an elimination game, putting them in an elimination position must have been pretty significant for him not to play. So he may not play the next game. If he plays the next game, I like Cleveland against either of these teams that win. We'll talk about it, but Charlotte versus Atlanta, I could see them beating either of those teams. Definitely Charlotte. Atlanta could be a good team. They haven't shown to be that great this year. They could definitely beat Cleveland in a single game, and so can Charlotte, really. As explosive as that team is, they're an undisciplined team. That's why they haven't been consistent all year. But in a single game, any of these three teams can win. But I do like Cleveland going forward. They did catch up in this game towards the end. Of course, Mobley was playing very good defense, but there's only so much you can do against this team that's piloted by Kyrie Irving and Kevin Durant, especially when Kyrie's clicking like he is right now. So yeah, no one wants to play the Nets except maybe Giannis, because he's a freak like that. Probably just be like, let's get it out of the way. Like, we got to beat them anyway, right? Which you don't really need to beat them. Like, you could hope that Boston beats them or, whatnot. But really, no one but Giannis wants to play the Nets. Probably the rest of the Bucks don't want to play the Nets either. For next series, I would be more confident picking Boston if they had Rob Williams healthy, but without him, I'm gonna lean Nets as like the smart decision. I don't want Nets to win the chip. I don't want Celtics to win the chip either as a Lakers fan, but I still am a big fan of what they did this year, how they're able to turn around that team, playing historically great defense since January. Um, I like the way they play and everything. I'm going to be unfortunately rooting for the Celtics. Alternative is the Nets, obviously. Um, but either way, it's going to be a great series, and I'm going to slightly lean the Nets in terms of my Vegas pick. Next game was Clippers at Minnesota. So for this game, Pat Beverly was insanely hyped up. He got, in his eyes, mistreated by the Clippers. In my eyes, too. They didn't want to pay him. In my eyes, obviously, like, slightly mistreated. But he was, had a lot of strong words for this. A lot of cussing, everything. Like post game, he was celebrating like it was a championship. The TNT guys were making fun of him. They had some really good memes about it. They had like him photoshopped over Kevin Garnett with the "anything is possible" quote. People were talking about like showing the pictures of Jordan winning the title like on the floor with the trophy. And, like, this is Pat Beverly, but he really did step up, obviously, especially after Towns fouled out. And then McDaniels also got his fifth foul. They subbed him out, and they brought Beverly in his place. And he was playing really hard on Paul George, who himself was cooking tonight. He was just making these shots that was just like, I don't care. I'm just going to step back from, 5 feet beyond the line and just, like, drill it. Like ice-cold shots. Not pandemic P that we saw, like, in the bubble. Again, like, Clippers have another chance for this next game. I think they're definitely going to beat whoever comes across them, unless Paul George like chokes really badly. But they got a solid team around them too. Like, I think they'll handle these teams very easily. You could really see, and this is like the main thing people talk about, like if this team had Kawhi, because that team around them that they have, the shooting, the defense, just the way they play. Terrence Mann had like 2 ridiculous blocks. I think third quarter or fourth quarter, he like snatched one out of the sky with like one hand. Another one he blocked it on the other end at the rim, and then ran it back with a nice dunk. Like, this team plays really well. Ty Lue, I actually really like him as a coach. He's came very far. He's a big upgrade over Doc Rivers for this Clippers team. This team is going to be dangerous when Kawhi comes back. Maybe they make noise right now, but the best they could get right now is the 8 seed. So they're not going to beat the Suns eventually. On the Minnesota side of things, they're going to be 7 seed. They're going to face the Grizzlies. That's going to be an interesting matchup. But for this game, Towns fouled out with more than 7 minutes left in the fourth. It was kind of a silly foul for him too, like knowing he has 5 fouls, just going for a loose ball that he shouldn't have, especially for someone with 5 fouls. Clippers really tried to shut him down, and they did, but D'Lo and Edwards scored more than half the points combined among those two players, 54 or 56 points, I think, between the two. Paul George, really good game. Edwards, D'Lo, Towns, not so good game. So for Towns, kind of makes me worry about them in the playoffs, especially, going up against a pretty good team in the Grizzlies that has Jaren Jackson Jr., who's all defensive team selection for me. I think I put him on my first team as the power forward there. If it wasn't for Gobert, I think it would be between him and Bam for Defensive Player of the Year, and I would vote him over Bam because of the games missed for Bam. So that's where I have, Jaren Jackson Jr. on defense. So if he plays that kind of defense, if Towns plays the kind of game he did today, then Timberwolves are in trouble. Of course, that all could not happen, and it could flip. Beverly could give John Morant trouble in the next series and all that. So it could go either way. This is going to be a competitive series. But I think Clippers, even if they win, they're going to beat the next team, which is going to be either the Spurs or the Pelicans. But then they're going to go right into the Suns' house, and I don't think that's going to happen without Kawhi. I'm pretty certain of that. Norm Powell's back. Yeah, I like this team, but they're not going to make it past the Suns. If they got to the 7th seed, if they won this game, it was going to be a different story. Like maybe they have a puncher's chance against Grizzlies. They're kind of the team that I guess people are targeting at the 2nd seed this year as an upset candidate. I mean, another one now is the Mavericks, sadly, which I'll talk about in a minute for a big reason. But going into tomorrow's games, we have Charlotte versus Atlanta. Atlanta's at home. Charlotte, very undisciplined team this year. They're young team, young stars. Miles Bridges, very good season, most improved player candidate. LaMelo Ball, making strides in the 2nd year. I don't think they're gonna have what it takes. I mean, Atlanta's been very disappointing this year. Capella's been disappointing. Collins has been disappointing. He's also been out. If those, the guys on Atlanta, if they just make their shots when Trey gives them the ball, they play good defense. The bigs play good defense. Help out a little bit on the pick and roll. Just support Trey Young. They'll get the job done against Charlotte. I could see it going either way, like I mentioned. I think either team loses to Cleveland, but I could definitely see Atlanta making it. So if they turn the corner over here, we saw them make the run. I mean, this team's going to face the Heat, which is not an unbeatable matchup, but neither of these teams have what it takes to beat the Heat. People are considering them like a soft 1 seed, which, yeah, maybe I could agree with a little, just at least in terms of I could see any of the other East teams, or like at least like 4 other East teams easily be the 1 seed or beat them. But this is still a very strong Heat team, very well coached team, very great defense, very good 3-point shooting. As long as Jimmy Butler's there, creating the offense for them, dishing it out to people and everything. Like this team's gonna be very hard to beat for either of these teams. So it's gonna be fun. Let's watch the play-in. A couple more games left, but I don't think it's gonna make much of a difference with either of the 8 seeds. Next up, we have Spurs and the Pelicans. Pelicans are hosting. This is really a toss-up for me, but I'm going to pick the Pelicans in this one. Obviously, fan of Pop, who isn't? He hasn't been that great of a coach this year because I feel like their team's not necessarily like winning with Pop ball, and like they snuck in because Lakers collapsed. I don't think either of these teams are going to make any noise in the playoffs. Like either of these teams, if they make it past Clippers in the game after this, I think they're just going to get swept by the Suns, to be honest. Like max 1 game. But for these teams against each other, picking the Pelicans, I love DeJounte Murray, but I also love Herb Jones. And I think, he's going to play some good defense on them, and they'll have too much offense with C.J. McCollum and Brandon Ingram. Like I said, I think the winner loses to Clippers. So a couple other stories, injury stories as we get ready for first round of playoffs. Luka injured his ankle in the last game. They're still trying to figure out the severity of it. Got the MRI and everything. I think he's done for the year. He should be. It was a very dangerous injury. I think it was Chuck that mentioned KD injured his Achilles after he had a similar injury, and then he came back in the finals. against the Raptors. Obviously, that set him back over a year. And of course, it's KD. He recovered. We saw what point he got, but that was no guarantee. With an injury like that, I'm not saying he's going to tear his Achilles, but coming back for these is a very dangerous proposition. And realistically, how far are they going to go? Like, are they going to win a title? Of course, if they make it to conference finals or anything like that, like, that's still a big improvement. That's still something to be very happy about. But when you weigh that against, the risk of injury, personally, I think he should be shut down for the year. I don't see how you heal from this injury that quickly. I don't see any way where he plays game one. I'm pretty sure he's going to miss the whole series, and I think him missing the whole series will be enough to basically take him out for the season, because I don't think they're going to get past the Jazz without him. They got good offense, generators and Brunson and Dinwiddie that could take his spot, when he's resting. But to do that for a whole series and against a Jazz team that we know they're struggling, but they still have that talent, they still have that ceiling. They have the ceiling of basically being the best offense in the league. So I don't think it's going to happen without Luka, unfortunately. But we'll see. We'll hear more news on his availability. Steph, it looks like he's coming back. It looks like he might be ready for game one. So I'm thinking he's probably going to miss max 2 games. If the Warriors could take 1 game without him, either take game 1 or take 1 of 2 games without him, I don't like the Nuggets' chances. Jokic is one of my favorite players. I've been calling him since his rookie season. I've been a big fan of his. I want him to build that playoff resume, because people keep using that as an excuse for MVP, which is silly, because you compare it to Embiid. Like, Embiid's actually been shut down a lot in the playoffs, even though he's been playing, anchoring their defense for them. He's been let down by teammates for sure, but let's not talk about teammates with Jokic. Like, I think his playoff resume is fine, but I think it needs to get better. Like, we saw what people were saying even about Giannis until he won the title last year, and then they completely flipped on that. I think if Jokic if he gets to the conference finals with this team, people should really shut up about what they say. He's been to conference finals before. Of course, that's with Murray blowing up in the bubble, but Jokic was their best player still, like, overall in those playoffs. Maybe not in that Jazz series, but I don't know. I want him to get that recognition. But if Murray and Michael Porter Jr. are coming back at all, which is what it looks like, I don't think either of them are coming back. Not just this series, but at all, then it's less important for Jokic to have a deep playoff run this year. So the basketball fan side of me, even though I don't want the Warriors to win, the basketball fan in me wants to see Steph and the Warriors at full strength, challenging the Suns and the rest of the league, and giving us a good finals. So I think Steph's going to return after 1 or 2 games. Warriors pull off 1 victory without Steph. I think they'll pull off the rest of it, but it'll be interesting. We'll see. Like, Jokic is the MVP for me. So anything can happen. There was a Coach of the Year awards. This was the award that's actually voted on by the rest of the coaches. So every coach in the league votes on this. Let's see if I could find the article. There you go. NBCA Coach of the Year honors. So this is not the official one that's given out by the league. That's voted on by media members and all that. This is the one that's actually voted on by the coaches, but this is not the official Coach of the Year. That sort of goes on your resume like that. There's a separate one. So last year, Tom Thibodeau, as we all know, won the NBA Coach of the Year. But the NBCA Coach of the Year, National Basketball Coaches Association, Monty Williams won last year, in my opinion, rightfully. And Monty Williams won again this year, again, in my opinion, rightfully. Now, I think he was the coach of the year both of these years. However, considering he got it last year, I would be fine to give it to someone else because it is a very stacked candidate pool this year. So the others that got awards here, I don't know if it lists it. Oh, there you go. So you have Willie Green, New Orleans Pelicans; Taylor Jenkins, Memphis Grizzlies, very well deserved. Tyronn Lue, Clippers, he's done a great job. Popovich, Spurs, I don't agree with that, at least as a finalist. There's too many good candidates here for him there. I also don't agree with Willie Green necessarily in that cream of the crop. They did have a lot of adversity this year, but a lot of their players were injured. Obviously, Zion's out the whole year. BI missed a big chunk of the season. Yeah, they made the play-in, but, how weak was that, right? Eric Spoelstra, Miami Heat, very well deserved. A name that's not mentioned here that should be actually two names. One is JB Bickerstaff, Cleveland Cavaliers, did a great job. But I think Ime Udoka is a top 3 for me. I would say Monty Williams, 1, Taylor Jenkins, 2, Ime Udoka really turned that Celtics. I mentioned them a few minutes ago. Their defense, historic defense, the turnaround that they had, the turmoil that they had when Udoka first came in. You thought he might get fired within his first couple months on the job. Really turned around. They got to the first seed. They weren't able to hold on to this first seed, but I think he's a top 3 right there, with Spoelstra and Bickerstaff. Should get recognition too. What else do I have? Okay, so I'm gonna go through NBA TopShot. I actually want to go through my MomentRanks fantasy game. So for whoever doesn't know about this, you have NBA TopShot, which is, these NFTs, right, that you collect from the players. You could actually use those NFTs to play in a daily contest, which I'll go to yesterday's. If you make it to the top 100, you basically, get paid that you could use that money on NBA TopShot. So I made top 100 with this lineup. I mean, it was a very narrow pool, obviously, with only 2 games, 4 teams out there. Lineup of Durant, Paul George, Kyrie Irving, Mobley, and Garland. Pretty close to the winning lineup, which swapped Edwards for Mobley, and probably swapped some of the other bonuses. So I'll do some videos describing that. It's pretty interesting. I mean, it's not a very high ceiling thing, but it's just something that you fill out every day. I've placed top 100 a few times. It's just free money you get on top of it, on top of what you're already, making on TopShot and all that. Let me set my entry now, actually, for tomorrow. So you got Hawks, Spurs, Pelicans, and Charlotte. Definitely going to go with Trae Young. So you basically score based on the type of play that the highlight is, right? So if it's an assist highlight or 3-pointer highlight and so forth, if that player scores better than expected, which is basically their average in the last 10 games in that category, you get bonus points. And different categories give you different bonuses per, additional. So without getting too into it, steals and blocks are very valuable, and then threes and assists are very valuable. Going over on points is not as valuable because it happens more often, so they award you less per point that you go over. So typically I go for steals and blocks, but you see, Murray averages 2 steals a game. So chances of him actually, topping that are kind of slim. But if he does, you get, it's kind of boom bust reward. he has been averaging 2.3 threes a game, which is very high for him. So I'm not going to call that he's going to beat that. And even if he does beat that, the bonus is not as high as if he gets the third steal. So I'm going to get a Murray steal in here. Trae Young's been averaging 11.2 assists and 3.4 threes. I think I'm going to pick three-pointers. I feel like if he has a 5-3 game, be very good. It's more likely than like a 14-assist game, even though to close the season he had a 15-assist game. And that put me in the money too. Let's see, I got to pick 5 players. I have 2. Can't go that deep. Like I mentioned, it's only 2 games tomorrow. So it's between Ball, Ingram. I don't think I'll put Bridges. I'm not putting JV. Rozier, maybe handles translates to assists. If he's going to get 5 or more assists. I could count on Capella blocks. He's been averaging less than a block a game. So if Capella has a 2-block game, is already like puts him in, contention. I'm gonna put Capella block. I'm gonna go big on it. So Capella only averages 28.7 points a game, which is significantly less than the alternatives, which I would be knocking out a guy like CJ. But he could easily make that up with a block or 2. So I'm going to go for Capella block. And then after that, these guys are just way too low for me to consider. See, Herb Jones is a dunk. If Phil steals and he has like a 4-steal game, that would have been nice, but not enough firepower. I'm just going to hope I hit bonuses here. LaMelo Ball, layup, 23 points a game. How much is he going to top that? Brandon Ingram. I'm going to go with CJ. I hope he has a high assist game. And then it's basically between Rozier, JV, BI, or LaMelo. I'm not going to mess around. I'm going to pick LaMelo. And that's my lineup there. And I go to NBA TopShot and I go to my challenges. Let's see what challenges we have today. This is basically if you own some of these cards, or if you don't own all of them to get the reward, you could buy a few of them. Obviously not cards, but moments. I think I did this the other day and I'm missing like 5 of them. So that's quite a bit that I need to buy for that. And that's the reward. You get another pack. What's this one? Play-in tournament. This one's not live yet. Okay. Any moment from top 3 players in points scored in each game from all 6 play-in tournament games. Okay. So I'll revisit that on another day. So now we're going to go to a reaction video on the Bill Simmons podcast again. Who is the NBA 2022 NBA MVP?
I got to say, I was ready for Giannis to win me over after he had that Tuesday, Thursday last week against Philly, against Brooklyn. I got excited about, you know what? He could steal this. His stats are amazing. I think he should get some real credit for the year after a championship year, how fucking hard that guy plays. They had some weird stuff, not a perfect team. Lopez was out most of the year. Like I started talking myself into it, and then they kind of just started throwing games away, including today. I want my MVP to care about, like, not be afraid of Brooklyn. I didn't like that they just kind of punted the 2 seed.
Wait, that's part of your MVP and calculus of this?
No, I'm saying I thought he had a chance to steal it, but he obviously didn't care, and there was some momentum there for him that just kind of dissipated. And I think Jokic grabbed it by the balls probably 4 or 5 days ago, and it seems like this is a wrap.
Yeah, I mean,
who do you have?
It's Jokic, guys. It's Jokic.
Let me take you through my maze here. I'll make it quick.
Great. What kind of maze are we talking? Is this like a Lost episode? Is this like Dexter? What kind of TV show am I entering?
What's up with that smoke? Did they ever come to the conclusion? What was
No,
that
it's,
Smoke
smoke?
Monster? Is Smoke Monster going to be
Westport.
here?
If I'm being totally honest about all of it, like, we all have little biases in there, right? Like little things that we think are important. So it's not just straight stats. I'd like to think I watch a lot of basketball, so I have a good sense of what's going on. Doesn't mean I know everything. Doesn't mean I get everything right. Then I think the story is always a big influence on the voting, but I was like, I don't want to be part of the story because I think there's two things that are clear. I probably went into this trying to find a way to get Embiid to vote because I love him. All right. Not that I don't love Jokic,
like
not that I don't love Giannis.
There's a lot of people that are going to do that.
I think he's like the one guiding light through all the Sixers bullshit over all of these years.
Even though Giannis is like the most lovable.
In the aftermath of Simmons tanking this season for a million different reasons, and one that we have to be sensitive about.
I don't think Embiid is that likable, though.
For Simmons' camp to like complain to ESPN.
Like, I like Embiid compared to a lot of players, right? A lot of players who like are rivals to the players, to my favorite players, right? Players who are like rivals to like Kawhi, Jokic, and those guys that I root for. I like them compared to those guys, compared to like Durant, Curry, and like I want him to do better than I do those guys. But I don't think he's that likable of a guy, right? And of course it has to do with the trolling and everything. It's like, I don't know, just comes off as immature. Like, yeah, he's a young guy, right? We all know that, and I think with his accent, with his size, with the way he plays, like in the game, the trash talk that he does, and all these sorts of things, this character is kind of turns him into a very like love or hate guy. But I think like the average fan coming into it, there's a lot of people who he's just gonna rub the wrong way, which like you don't see at all with Giannis. And I don't think Jokic rubs people the wrong way. I think the reason why people don't like love him is it's more that they don't like love him. They're not like as inspired by his play for some reason. Like, I think it's incredible, but of course I see how certain people don't. It's kind of like in a Tim Duncan fashion, right? Like, plays the game the right way. He's very technical, very skilled. Not as much of like, I can't even say he's not as flashy because his passes are as flashy as they can get. Not even for a center. Like, let's stop talking about like the for a center stuff. Like, I'm not even like considering him in that category. Like, the Gasol brothers were incredible passers for big men. There's been several good like big men passers. There's been a lot of great forward passers. We never really compare them to point guards, except for like LeBron, right? There's very few forwards and centers in history that we've talked about their passing as if they're point guards. Kind of Larry Bird, right? And LeBron, right? Jokic is one of those guys. Like, I cannot have a conversation about Jokic's passing as if he's a center. It's just like almost unfair. Like, we can't talk about him that way. And the degree of difficulty, as well as like the highlight ability of his passes, is incredible. And that's like the main thing people know about Jokic is about his passes, and that's because those are the highlights that they see from him. That's the stats that stick out the most from him. It's a center with high assists, like 7 to 8 assists per game. He gets those triple doubles, but the guy's averaging almost 14 boards a game. That's like Dwight Howard numbers, guys, like prime Dwight Howard numbers. There's very few people who've been averaging more than 15 boards a game in this, recent like last 2 decades era. Like, there's only a couple guys per year that go over like 12 boards a game, really. And like a couple of those guys are like Steven Adams, right? Where like that's all they do, like Drummond and Steven Adams, right? he's getting dinged on like his scoring numbers because he doesn't have the scoring title that Embiid does. We all know he can score at that level, right? Or do we all know that, right? And if we don't, it's like you got to look at those parts of Jokic's game. Like people notice the passing, and that's how he's flashy to everyone, but he's like quite arguably the best post scorer in the league. Like I don't understand how people give that like immediately to Embiid. His efficiency, which includes a lot of other shots, a lot of mid-range shots, a lot of three-pointers, his efficiency like dominates Embiid's. Like 9% higher field goal percent, right? We're not talking an effective field goal with, the threes that he shoots or anything. Like, who's the better post scorer? Like, so much of Embiid's game comes from getting to the free throw line this year. 27 free throw attempt games, 20 free throw attempt games, like all over the place. Yeah, he's getting fouled. Like, of course, like he's a strong player. He gets fouled. They can't do anything about it. They have to foul him. He makes his free throws. He shoots them pretty well, but he's not able to score in the post. Definitively better than Jokic in the way that a lot of people are saying. I feel like they're just assuming that Embiid has to be a better point post scorer because that's where he gets most of his points compared to Jokic, or most of his recognition. They see he gets more points per game. They see he's a post player. If this guy is the guy that plays more like a guard, then that guy is going to be the guy that's more physical. Jokic is one of the most physical players in the game. He has probably the best stamina of anyone in the game. Yeah, for me. And then if there's a chance, I'll talk about the defense too.
And that Simmons didn't criticize Embiid after the Toronto series.
Yeah.
Just because Embiid put his arms up because he couldn't believe in a playoff game that Simmons didn't dunk when they shouldn't. You know what I mean? Like Joel's been the guy that's got it right. He's the guy that's figured it out. He stayed healthier than I ever thought. But that's not really what this award is about, all right? So if I was admitting a pre-bias to like which way would I lean in a tie, it's probably because I'd really love to see Joel Embiid get an MVP. Then there was this stretch of Giannis where he was playing against Brooklyn, the Philly win where he has the block. And I'm going, do you actually think anybody's better than him right now? Because it doesn't feel that way. Now, yes, with Durant's scoring arsenal and the last couple minutes of a playoff game, the shots that Durant can get you, I think, are beyond anybody else in the league. And that's why I'm still like a little sensitive to the idea that would I still actually take Giannis over Durant? Not to start a franchise because Giannis is always healthier, right?
Are we talking about late in the game, the defense that Giannis can give you, though? Like, you look at that play, the block, right, on Ayton last year. You look at the fast break, like, obviously KD runs the fast break, but like Giannis, obviously it was like Drew Holiday that locked up and got the steal last year in the playoffs, but yes, KD can give you that shot. Like, Giannis is the best player in the league, in my opinion. I don't necessarily think it's KD who he's beating out or might not beat out in some people's eyes. I think it still might be Jokic. Like, I don't know. I'm talking myself into Jokic even more, like, day by day.
Right. But I'm like, if I'm going who I just think is the best, it might be Giannis. And then I ask myself, if Giannis hadn't won one, Giannis would win in a landslide probably this year because the voters would say, let's finally get it to Giannis. So am I holding previous success against Giannis the way we've done that in the MVP?
Now you're talking my language. I love you got to throw out the previous results.
I had this week or two where I go, I think I might vote Giannis. And then I came through everything.
Let me say, so like, he said if Giannis hadn't won this year, he would win in a landslide. That's because, not saying that if it's an even playing field, for example, that he would win it, but more so that if he was missing one, we'd be like, we got to get this guy an MVP, right? More in that sense, which is sort of aligned with the argument that he's making about Embiid, being missing one, and Jokic just winning last year. Giannis having 2, but still, like, Jokic would have 2 if he wins this. Like, if we're using that as any of the argument, like, I do sort of agree with that, because if Giannis is the best player in the league, and he's been approximately the best player in the league over the last 4 years, and he won MVP, Finals MVP with the Finals last year, and he still doesn't have an MVP, and he's been playing like this, yes, we would. But that's not the case. Like, he's won 2 MVPs before, right? And I do want to throw out the history, like, and I don't want that argument for, Giannis might have or would have won the MVP if he didn't have 2 already, to be used as an argument for Embiid to get it this year, right?
Again with Jokic, and I've watched so many of those Denver games. Not to say I haven't watched the other guys a million times. Jokic does fucking everything for a bad team.
Yeah,
and if you want to get into the semantics of 6 seed versus a 4 seed, like, you realize Sixers people are going, you can't vote for a 6 seed for MVP. It's like, you're a fucking 4 seed and you're like a game ahead of them. If Embiid had 65 wins, okay, different conversation. If Giannis had 60 wins and they were like a Phoenix in the East, different conversation. The records are close enough that you can throw out any of the seeding talk. Jokic does everything for a bad Denver team. They all have similar records, including, and Jokic defense. Is going to complete the first 2,000 point, 1,000 rebound, 500 assist season, while having a usage rate that still holds up with a true shooting percentage that has only been doubled by, or only been accomplished by Steph twice, Durant, Adrian Dantley, and Barkley. The entire Jokic package and the record being similar, and his stuff with him, I don't know how you vote for anybody else.
If you're looking for a low-stress online business that is simple to set up and just works, one that gives you...
So, yeah, talking about the historical usage, these advanced metrics, there's a few of them. I mean, a lot of people don't follow them. A lot of people who are, like, very close in the industry, stats people, that really follow these metrics, but they're not known to, like, the mainstream so much. Like LeBron, there's actually, statistic called LeBron. Like, a lot of these statistics, he's top 5 all-time season, all-time. Whereas you have those same statistics, you have Embiid and Giannis are like 2 and 3 in basically all of them, 2 and or 3, right? Like flip-flops, and like Jokic is basically number 1 in all of them for this year. So it's like Giannis and Embiid are 2 and 3, right? Jokic is number 1 in several of them all time, and like top 5 in all of them all time. There's like 5 or 6 of them. I'll be more prepared to pull it up and talk about it at another time. But that's the advanced metrics. You look at the basic numbers. You look at what he's doing for his team. You look at him in terms of highlights and everything. Like, there's no argument where he, like, clearly loses, in my opinion. The only argument is, like, oh, he won it last year. The playoff argument is BS. Giannis won 2 while we were complaining about him in the playoffs. Jokic has done as much, if not more, than Embiid in the playoffs. Not counting last year, Jokic basically did as much, if not more, than Giannis in the playoffs. It's just the way it is. And I was saying while they're talking too, he's their best defender too. Like, there's this talk about, like, Aaron Gordon, this, that, because, they put him on their best, like, perimeter guy. Like, he's the guy that you see that would guard, like, LeBron, right, for example. Doesn't mean he's their best defender. Like, Aaron Gordon is not that great of a defender. Monty Morris is, like, their next best defender. Austin Rivers, inconsistent. Like, he's their best defender too. So that he's carrying that team to basically the same record. It's like, yeah, Philly's team is not that great either. The bench is terrible. Like, Denver's bench has been playing better. Why do you think Denver's bench is playing better? They have basically like a Steve Nash on their team, someone that makes their entire team better. Steve Nash, Chris Paul, right, on their team.
You're preaching to the choir. I mean, it's funny that we went through the same. Giannis kind of left that door open for him at some point. I really like Embiid too. I did a whole 15-minute thing at the top of my pod like 2 months ago about what a shame it was that they were going to waste this great story with this dumb Ben Simmons situation. And then they addressed it, and they got a guy who kind of sent them sideways. Didn't really help them that much. Look, sometimes we just have a couple guys who had great seasons. And I think this has turned into, if you don't pick Embiid, that means you're against Embiid or whatever. And I just feel like Jokic had a harder burden than Embiid did this season.
That's a great point. I love that Bill said that. Like, Jokic, still, after what Embiid has been through, it is a bigger burden with Jokic. Like, he lost his two best players off the, it's like, okay, you say, like, okay, Tobias Harris has been terrible. Like, how terrible do you think Tobias Harris would be if he had someone like Jokic facilitating him? I mean, now he has Harden facilitating him, and he's been doing worse since Harden's been here. So, yeah, it does have a lot to do with Tobias himself. I mean, at this stage, like, Aaron Gordon's better than Tobias Harris. But you have to think, like, if Jokic was on that team, the rest of the team would be better. We would be talking more about, like, the players that people are bringing up that, like, Denver has, like, the only reason those guys are, like, doing that. It's like, no insult to those players. I feel like those guys would also agree with it too. Like, sometimes I look at some of the ways he sets up their offense, and I wonder, like, I want to look at, like, the expressions on people's faces when they, like, receive a pass from him, right? Like, the give and go that they do, and, like, they give him the ball and they expect it. They know that it's gonna, fall in their lap. They don't know how it's gonna get there. They don't know, like, it's going to be touch pass or what, like, he's going to do something behind the back. They don't know if it's going to come from bounce pass from the left side, the right side. Like, they don't know how it's going to get there. They know that it's going to be in their hands, and they're not surprised by it at all, right? That's not the method by which the ball lands in their lap. Doesn't matter. They just know it's going to happen, and they expect it. When they cut, they know they're going to get the ball back, right? If they're open, they know they're going to get the ball. If you play with someone like that, like, and you're not getting better, then I don't know what to say. Like, maybe Tobias Harris isn't better if you put him next to Jokic. But I find that very hard to believe, to be honest.
He lost his best two teammates. He played with a 2 through 12 that was probably bottom 7 or 8 in a 2 through 12 if we're doing the 2 through 12 draft. Where's that
Do they beat the Lakers?
Going?
Do they beat the Lakers without LeBron? A Westbrook-led Lakers without LeBron and AD. Does Denver without Jokic beat the Lakers without? I mean, maybe not. The Lakers are just, like, that bad. But maybe we just put LeBron on that team. Let's say AD's injured. Even with LeBron on that team. No, obviously the Lakers would beat that team. What am I saying?
In the 2 through 12 draft.
There's one other player with, like, an above average PER. I think there's 0 players with a positive net rating or something like that.
Right.
And so then you could be like, well, wait a minute. So Embiid's going to lose because the rest of the Nuggets aren't as good. And you're like, well, this is kind of where we land back on most valuable. But then in a vacuum, when I see the Embiid arguments, like, okay, the last center to win the scoring title, you're not going to vote for that guy. You're like, okay, but you don't get to have all the Embiid arguments in a vacuum when you have stuff like Jokic, who's going to finish with an average of 27, 13, and 7. That's never been done before. It's never been done before. And it's not
2,000
bullshit. Okay. Cause we'll go traditional number on you.
I like that. 2,000 points, 1,000 rebounds, and 500 assists. Never been done before. The longevity, like, the amount of games he's played, the amount of minutes he's played, that has to do with the argument as well. Like, we can't completely ignore that. I know it's not the thing where it's like you just look at who has the most, like, count up points, rebounds, assists all together, lump them all together, and who has the most of them, which assists and rebounds are worth more than points. But anyway, like, you don't just do that, right? For obvious reasons. But when a guy with all those numbers put together and he's played the most, largest sample size, least
These
rest.
are real numbers in a guy that has no help, and he's still incredibly efficient.
And eye test wise, it holds up every time you watch him. It's always unbelievable how much he does. And I don't understand why he doesn't get tired.
He's not a bad team, great stats guy. He's not just like chucking up shots. Like, if he wants to get his points, he'll get his points on a bad team, right? He's not doing Westbrook stuff to get his rebounds. He's a beast in the paint. I want to see if they talk
There's
about
that
the
one
defense,
stretch last month when they had was 6 games in 9 nights, and it was the first time he started to look a little beaten up. And
they lost to Golden State at home during that stretch. They were hitting a weird.
Yeah, he's beaten up because everybody's just hitting him with the kitchen sink, and he's the point guard, and he has to protect the rim, and he's playing with these guys.
Goes out of the game bleeding.
The crazy thing about his assist number, because I saw some people are trying to discredit it, where it's like he's averaging 8 assists a game, but some of them are handoffs. Well, if we're gonna start discrediting him, what about all the assists that he didn't get because he was playing with a bunch of role guys, right? The fact that he wasn't playing with Jamal Murray, who probably would have been worth 2 assists a game for him. I do think there's a world where he could be a triple-double average guy. And I don't care about triple-doubles, but I do think
And not just that, the assists that he didn't get, not just because the people missed the shots or they, or whatever you want to say, they got closed out on before they could shoot, or whatever you want to say about it, the hockey assists, right, and everything else. He's getting these assist numbers without being the primary initiator of the offense a lot of the time, right? He's not bringing the ball up every possession. He's not like the Chris Paul where he's sometimes he brings the ball up, but his touch time is less than half of a lot of the point guards, basically, essentially. The other guys who are getting 7, 8 plus assists, the Trae Youngs, the Lukas, he has less than half the touch time. This is with his scoring too, right? With him scoring 27 a game, with him being a post player, right? Dribbling the ball a lot and all of that, being the best player on this team. They try to drive the ball through him. He still has less than half the touch time than those people. And it's you see his touch passes and all these sorts of things where he knows where the ball is going and all of that. He's not playing hard in ball, dribbling and then the clock's running out, or he has to drive in, dish it out. He's not getting those types of assists. The assists he gets are harder than the average assist. So even if you say his assist numbers should be lower for whatever reason, the stat counters are giving him more, more generous on giving him assists or some conspiracy like that. To have to come up with that, to discount what he's been doing, it's pretty crazy.
There could be a 25, 13, 10 in his future. I was looking back at everybody I voted for the last 6 years. And in 2019, I voted Embiid over Jokic. Last year, I voted Jokic over Embiid for first team, second team. But Jokic he's put in the work now. We're talking 2019 second team, 2020 second team, and then 2 first teams. One this year, one maybe this year, one last year. But he's put in the work. I still feel like there's a level for him to go where he might even be a little bit better, which is crazy to say. But as his teammates get better, I think he's going to get a little bit better. That's why, to me, he's the MVP. He's doing this with a below average supporting cast. And I think if you switch the 2 guys, I do not think Denver's record is as good. And you could talk me into Philly's record being as good. And that's it.
If Philly had a much better record than Denver, then maybe you can get me there, you know?
Right.
Because
they got Harden and they still didn't get there.
And it still would be tough.
They got Harden and they still couldn't pull away from what the Nuggets were doing. Like, at the time, I was saying Embiid is the MVP. Like, there was whispers of Jokic as the MVP. For me, part of it had to do with the whole, like, fatigue. Not necessarily fatigue that, like, oh, Jokic is not going to get another one. But, you know, with the whole, like, yeah, Embiid should deserve it. Like, if he's healthy rest of the season. He was also on an absolute tear. Like, 30-plus a game for how long? He had, like, 5 straight games with 31. Around that time when he was on that tear, just like 35, 40, 46, and like however many minutes. It was like that same night where like Embiid had that insane scoring night and Jokic has an insane triple-double on the same night and was completely overshadowed by Embiid, which maybe what Embiid did was more impressive. But it's things like that overshadowed it, especially the peak that Embiid hit around then. But then you realize, like, since Harden's got there, they haven't been winning at the rate that you expected them to. Like, people were just celebrating. Shaq and Kobe. People were talking Shaq and Kobe with Embiid and Harden. Like, sure, most of the blame probably falls on Harden. But what we expect from these players, like, you have to think how picky we are going to have to be to separate these three guys. Now, I've been focusing mainly on, like, Jokic versus Embiid. Like, Giannis is over there, like, very easily could be an MVP. Like, we can't even talk about anyone besides these three guys. Like, I don't want to hear that Devin Booker talk. Like, we can't talk about anyone besides these three guys. We have to be so incredibly picky and pick at, you know, every part of these players' games to try and differentiate a winner here. Yeah.
You can point to the analytics. You can point to the traditional stuff. You can watch all of these guys as much as I feel like I have and have a really good grasp on who's what. And I just, look, it's so unfortunate for Embiid because what's happening is that we have these three guys all doing something so incredibly special that everyone's individual arguments are historic and overwhelming. But that's not the way it works. Like, I don't like when we'll go back and look at results and you'll say, well, you know, how could this have not happened? Or how come this guy, it didn't happen with this guy? And you're like, okay, but are you just saying it as blanket? Or are you comparing, are you putting in context with what also was happening around him? So they'll look back. We could go back in 5 years and be like, I can't believe Embiid didn't win the MVP. It's like, okay, but are you going to ignore the other incredible stories that we also had that season? And that's also, the whole point. That's the whole point of winning it for your season.
Also, this was an awesome Embiid season. It shouldn't be denigrated if he's number 2 in MVP instead of number 1.
But that's what he
answered
said.
Every single question we ever had about him. He stayed way more durable than I ever thought. He destroys any team that's undersized, like in a real crazy Shaq late 90s, early 2000s way. And he's good on both ends. He's a great teammate. And this is like, it's all a win. And sometimes there's just a guy who was a smidge better. Like, you go back to 2017, I voted for Harden that year. Westbrook run. They were 47-35. Houston was 55-27. And Harden's stats were pretty much the same as Westbrook's stats. It's just people got excited about triple doubles and what he meant to the franchise. There was a little bit of the Jokic argument.
We didn't understand
for this team.
But we said this before. We didn't understand usage as well. Because that's the single highest usage season in the history of the NBA. So then you look at it that way and you go, oh, all right.
Well, then Zach voted for Kawhi that year. They had 61 wins. Kawhi had the third worst case out of 3. That one never sat right to me because the eye test wasn't there. Mm-hmm. The eye test is there with Embiid and it's there with Giannis. If you catch them on the right night, you're like, these guys are – those 3 guys I thought were head and shoulders from an eye test, ass-kicking standpoint over everybody except for Durant. from just watching night to night and being like, holy shit. And those are the 4 best guys in the league. And they're, Giannis is at his peak. Jokic is pretty much there. And Embiid will probably never have a better season than this season. So to me, there's nothing to be ashamed of. I think this was just a great MVP season. Really was.
Embiid
and if
wants
somebody's
a lot.
like, Embiid's my guy.
He's not
the
being
Simmons
humble
thing was
about
fucked
it at
up.
all.
He did everything for that team. He kept them together and blah, blah. Like, I'd be like, all right, I get it. I hear your argument. But for me, it's Jokic by a hair.
Jokic has among the most active hands in the league, in the entire league, especially at the center position. You look at the steals he gets, a lot of even the blocks that he gets are really like steals that he's like ripping away as the player's going up. So it could be either a steal or block depending on, at what point they call it a field goal attempt or not. He's getting in passing lanes for a guy that's like as like lumbering and bulky as we like to think about him, right? This like slow, unathletic guy with very little hops, which is mostly true, but he's athletic in the sense that he's just always going in the game. Defense, offense. He's at the right place at the right time. Tim Duncan-esque, where Tim Duncan's not like flying around everywhere like you would see like a Mutombo or Dwight Howard type of Ben Wallace type of player. He's like flashy, like blocks and everything, and he's at the right place at the right time. He's telling his teammates what to do. He's picking up where he sees his teammates. Like the IQ that he has that allows him to do everything on offense, not just the passing, guiding where the teammates cut and all of that. Like foreseeing things, like seeing defensive coverages and all of that, kind of understanding what post moves he needs to do, how he needs to arc his shot, like based on the defender, reading the defender, all of those sorts of things that are like Kobe-esque, Jordan-esque in many regards, right? Those same things I see in his defense. Understanding, recognizing offensive schemes, because he understands how an offense works. He understands how a defense works. He doesn't have the physical tools in terms of the hops and the speed, the lateral quickness necessarily, but he replaces that with active hands, getting in passing lanes. He doesn't necessarily deny people at the rim as much, but I've seen, at least 3 or 4 like game-winning blocks where it's like a 1 or 2 point game where the Nuggets are up and he just denies people at the rim, right? Stuffs them. It's like with his like arm just like flailing up like spaghetti, like just like gets the hand on the ball and stops it. Like it just gets it done. Like defensively, people don't like to think of Jokic that way, but he's improved so much in the past 2 years defensively that that it's sometimes hard to believe, and that's why it flies under the radar a lot of time. And Embiid has like probably get a lot of heat for this. Like he's stepped back defensively because he's been focusing so much on offense. Now he still has the same ability, I believe, and more so in the playoffs, especially like hopefully Harden picks up a lot of the offensive slack. He's just been looking like a completely different player than like 2 years ago at Houston. But if Harden picks up some of the offensive slack, you'll see Embiid go back to defensive dominance, which is very possible for. But like we can't count that right now because we're counting what the player did this year. It's like we know how good LeBron is defensively, but we know he's been coasting on defense for so many years. We see flashes of it, which kind of bring us back to, LeBron's still a good defender, but he's been coasting on defense, right? He's not winning MVPs. He didn't win MVPs for several seasons because he wasn't having those seasons over those other players. Doesn't matter if you're a better player, you have the better ability or anything like that, right? So that's just what I think overall. And I didn't give Giannis like nearly as much talk here, but for Giannis, it's his defense really puts him up there historically. His attitude, the way he carries the Bucks, his co-stars have been hurt a lot of the season. Giannis absolutely deserves it, but I feel like the conversation here is trending towards, if not Embiid, then why not Embiid? Like, do you have reasons to not pick Jokic? Like, if you don't have a good reason to put Embiid over Jokic, then it's going to be Jokic. That's kind of what I feel like, how it's shaping up now. Like, now that the season's ended, like, the seeding's done and all of that. So that's gonna be it for my first episode. I went pretty long. I'll be more structured next time. Try to figure out, what are things that are more interesting. Some of the more bits. Try to bring in some more things. Take out more things. So still getting used to it. Thanks for listening.